Namaste. One of the principal challenges in life for those who have turned to yoga, especially Karma Yoga, is what should be done and what should not be done. Now, this is a very big challenge. We are often told that it was so easy for Arjuna to have asked Sri Krishna. But we should not forget that Sri Krishna took him through all the 18 chapters of the Gita. Meaning thereby it is not such a simple, easy answer. Gahano karmani gati. Because it's not just about the action, but the states of consciousness, the past, the future, everything is interwoven together. So what Sri Krishna does is orients Arjuna correctly. And at the end he gives that great mantra that whatever it is, be in my state, turn towards me, mad bhavam mad gata, take refuge in me, and then surrender everything to me, and I'll take care of whatever you are doing. So, even then, he leaves a free choice. So, the first sutra we get from there is that it is not so simple unless we have set our mind, heart, and vital in a tranquil state. Because God's voice now, Shri Krishna is within. We don't have to go to a battlefield and ask. Then some people try to read books and get an answer. Mother has said that especially when you are ready for spiritual life, then one of the things that happens is that whatever your question is, somewhere or the other you start getting answers. Somebody will tell you something, a phrase, or you'll open a book and you'll see something, or as Amal Kiran, suddenly you read a newspaper and your eyes fall there. Because everything in the world starts drawing us closer to what is deep within us. This is how life operates. As such, it operates. So, this is another way that we just pray, concentrate. Mother has advised this. And with full concentration, we open a book, particularly books which contain within them deep spiritual consciousness, as the mother says, like the Gita, synthesis of yoga, of course, Savitri, and prayers and meditation. And then we read. But instead of giving it a justification or explanation, because that can also intervene between reading and understanding, we try to reflect upon it, go deep within it, to see what exactly I am being told. But this also is not as easy as it seems. Because many things can come in between. While it is okay to put oneself in a beautiful inner state, calm inner state, the desired self is always active, which may interfere with the guidance. Some people try something else, they put chits and pray to mother and pick up one. It's also okay. It can work. I mean, it can work, it may not work. So all these things are there, but the ultimate, when Mother and Sri Aurobindo are there, it's very easy. You just write to them. They are the first avatars who have written so elaborately on every issue of life. So that's another place where if we read through their writings, we will get a general drift of what is really expected of us in a given situation. And one thing which is very clear is the attitude. That part is repeatedly there, more than an external list of do's and don'ts, the attitude. And the attitude should be such that we need to understand that certain things, certain activities, thoughts, feelings will take us closer to the divine, and certain attitudes, activities, thoughts and feelings will take us away. So this is a very broad guidance. So we have to see inside. Nobody else can tell us. Because what may be applicable at one point may not be applicable at another. So we have to see what is bringing us closer to the contact. The sign of that contact will be peace, tranquility, joy, a sense of conviction that comes from truth. On the other hand, the sign that we are not in contact will be either excitement, anger, frustration, depression, confusion, disturbances of various kinds. So these are the two broad indicators that which way am I going. Then, of course, ultimately, the best is if one can get an inner guidance. So about inner guidance, Sri Aurobindo writes in very beautifully the Supreme Will. There is a chapter in Synthesis of Yoga, and there is another chapter, Standards of Conduct and Spiritual Freedom. Now, why this problem comes? Because divine doesn't act according to a moral rule book. If it did so, life would have been very simple. You have a list of do's and don'ts. Very often people say, Indian thought is very complex, we don't understand. Because it wants to hit on the target. So it is not hovering around, it wants to know. And since the divine unfolding is different in different individuals, and in the same individual in different stages of evolution, in different states of consciousness, so we can't confine the spiritual freedom of the infinite into some clear-cut rule book of guidance. That's what Sri Aurobindo said humorously when someone asked him. He said, "Oh, rule book for life." And he laughed at it, because such a thing doesn't exist. And yet we need to know, because when we are asked to be obedient to the divine, it means we need to know what the divine at any given point wants of us, expects of us. So, we read a prayer today about how to perceive this divine guidance. When Mother was asked what is the state in which we can perceive, she says, no preferences and a state of equanimity. Now, no preferences is a very interesting phenomenon. I have myself dwelt a lot on this, in the beginning, that what does it mean, no preferences? So I saw that when I am saying no preferences, I already have a list of things in my head. Unknowingly, they are structures. So I say no preferences, but actually there are hidden biases and preferences. But divine doesn't operate like that. It's like Arjuna says, I will obey whatever you say. But he has preferences, which are there. These divine will never ask me to shoot an arrow. This is something which he will never ask me to do. So we have very hidden biases, hidden preferences, and to practice no preferences is very difficult. But we have to do it. Equanimity, meaning thereby you are not thinking of the result. If I do this, this may happen. Advantage, calculation, then it will not come. So equanimity. Third is a state of inner peace, because otherwise the voice of the divine will be muffled all the time. Then fourth is to awaken to revelation, intuition, inspiration, which is again difficult. It requires a basic quietude in the being. And very often, because the psychic doesn't operate the way our mind operates. We know that, even when it chooses circumstances of birth, it is not based on I will be very nice circumstances, I'll have money, my parents will be wealthy. The psychic doesn't. It may choose the most difficult circumstances, if that is required for its growth. And Sri Aurobindo goes on to say it is better to err following the voice of the soul than to follow the so-called practical wisdom of humanity. Because it leads us through strange ways. Look at Socrates, always used to follow his demon. And where did it land him? Inside the jail and to Hemlock, where he has to die. He was, until the last moment he is asked to escape, and he consults his inner voice and says, no, I have to go through this and I accept it. Now, if you look at it, it's most impractical thing. Even his closest disciples couldn't understand that why this is happening. Even Christ, even he has a doubt at one point of time. Why hast thou forsaken me, O Lord? Why are you pushing me through this state? Look at Sri Aurobindo. In the jail, he says, for a moment, I asked him that I have only wanted nothing selfish. I have only wanted the good of the country. And I wanted your protection till that time. And what is it? I am here in the jail with the gallows and the, hangman's noose right above my head. And then Shri Krishna tells him, wait and see. So we have to understand that the divine guidance doesn't operate according to our idea of either good or bad, this result, that result. It is something very different, driven by the deep necessity of the soul to go through a certain adventure and evolve through it. Now it's a very huge platform on which any and everything. So we have to still try to tune ourselves and try as much as possible to listen to this divine guidance. But before we do that, there is something very important to understand again and again. And Sri Aurobindo has said that in one of his letters. Why? Because this, very often I see people speaking in the same terms. Even Gandhiji used to use the word divine guidance, voice of my soul, but it was the voice of conscience. And Sri Aurobindo makes it very clear, the voice of the soul is not the voice of the conscience. Voice of the conscience is based on a mental idea, rule of what is right and wrong. So he used to call it the voice of the soul, but it was not a voice of the soul. Equally, there are people who are driven by ambition and they may use the word voice of the soul, but it's not voice of the soul. They feel an inner indication which is only justifying their ambition and other things. So here comes this beautiful prayer, June 27th, 1913. Thy voice is so modest, impartial, sublime in its patience and its mercy, that it does not make itself heard with any authority. So, what are the characteristics of the divine voice? It's modest, impartial. It's not only thinking of what will help me succeed, but it is looking at the total picture of the creation. That then only we can be impartial. Sublime in its patience. It doesn't push its agenda. And its mercy. It forgives. It understands the human follies, failings, all this mercy, that it does not make itself heard with any authority, any potency of will. It is like a cool, soft and pure breeze. Just imagine how Mother is comparing it with suddenly a cool breeze, soft breeze blows over us and leaves us tranquil and free. It is like a crystalline murmur that imparts a note of harmony to a discordant concert. So, one thing which is characteristic of the divine working is it creates harmony. It is tending towards harmony. It is not the voice of division. It is the voice of harmony, voice of unity. It wants to create something which will be harmonious. The sign of a developed spiritual being is that he has an instinctive love for harmony. Anything which is discordant, anything which is, even Mother has defined truth as supreme harmony. It is not just about one person, two persons. It takes into account everything else which is connected in our life. Only for him who knows how to listen to that note. It's like, all the tamasha is going on, and suddenly there is a note. This note reminds me of two little things. One was when somebody told Mother about the new age music and wanted her to listen to it. Look at the impartiality, look at the absence of preference. Most of it will say, judge it. And no, it's only ragas and all. What is this new age music? All nonsense. But she said, okay. So the music that was played was one of the Beatles' music. She heard it. Then she said, there are a few notes here and there which indicate that they are open to the new consciousness. In all that, she could see the few notes. And one can see, even after all that anguish and cry is there. Then the disciple said, oh, would you like to listen more? He said, no, it is enough. I know it. I know it now. And then she said something like, barbarians of the new world. They've broken through the limits of the mind. They're looking for something new, but they don't know. Still they belong to the new world, which is different from the old world paradigm. Another thing which reminds is that you listen to all this, sometimes these bhajans, dancing, so much, it's a chaos, cacophony. But suddenly in between, you will hear a word like Govinda, Krishna. It's like a note which suddenly comes, and as if like the sum of music behind, like a note, suddenly it comes. And that is what is a little note in that whole cacophony. So, yes, I remember this in one of the songs. Very upbeat song. But there was a repetition of this word Govinda. I've forgotten the song now. Govinda, like that it was coming. Now the rest of the song was all usual dancing stuff. But this particular note which used to come like a refrain used to give some kind of a different feeling. And the Mother speaks of this, in certain movies, even certain sounds. So similarly, it is like a note. Look at it, it's not like a full music is blowing, but a note here and there. Only for him who knows how to listen to that note, how to breathe that breeze. It contains such a treasure of beauty. Another thing about it is, it will always want us to go towards beauty. never towards something crude, ugly. Divine loves beauty and harmony, so that note is always towards beauty in action, beauty in thought, beauty in feelings, beauty in speech. A treasure of beauty and such a perfume of pure serenity and noble grandeur. There is in it a grandeur, after all, divine, but noble grandeur. There is a very interesting thing about this noble grandeur. Have you seen today only I was just sharing this with someone, this flower dahlia. Any idea what is its name? There are many names Mother has given to different types of dahlia. One of them is vanity. Okay? So vanity, she describes one of the forms of falsehood. Dambha, Asuri Sampada. Another dahlia she defines as nobility. Third one she defines as dignity. In dignity you have mental dignity, psychic dignity. It will not stoop down to something which is low because it's unbecoming. It cannot be mean because it has that sense of nobility. Now see, vanity is changed into dignity and nobility. And then there is a real big dahlia, and its name is superhumanity. Just imagine. So it is the same thing which is, you can actually see in this flower the transformation. One which is showing off, the other is noble grandeur, superhumanity. It is noble, it will not stoop to something low and ugly in thought or actions. It's impossible for it. And that is the hallmark of a superhumanity. So that is what she's saying, noble grandeur. It's a wonderful word. That all extravagant illusions vanish. Noble grandeur. So all these extravagant, divine is wanting me to do this, take this route, because this is the route I'll go and have success. Mother says if you ever judge the divine will by the results, you will be misled. And in the world as it is today, you are likely to land up straight in the trap of the hostiles. The divine gave me success. Very often, Sri Aurobindo says, very often, it is through the failures that the divine leads you. And he says, what if failure suits him better for his purpose? Ultimately, what is the purpose? Not outer success, but an inner evolution, growth. So, Pandavas, failure. Somebody could write the story as failure story. Even when they finally won the war. Till date, people say they don't notice Duryodhana's 100 faults. Like Dhritarashtra, till now they say, oh, why did Arjuna kill Karna? Abhimanyu is forgotten. Oh, they cut off his head. Dronacharya. These are the things you will hear people. All that Draupadi's, Chiraran, Abhimanyu Vad, usurping the throne, ambition, Lakshagre, drowning Bhima in the river, attempts to murder, what not, the game of dice, all that is forgotten. But, you say Krishna is a god, see how Karna was killed. So this is the way we look at it. This is one way to look at it. But divine will doesn't act like that. It doesn't want extravaganza of illusions. The Pandavas wouldn't have succeeded. Even when they have succeeded, they have carried with them the baggage till date. So it is not an extravaganza of illusions. Do this, put your money at stake. Somebody used to ask, wrote to Sri Aurobindo, I believe you are a yogi, I am going to put my money, you please tell me which stock I should put my money at, and you will get this much percentage share. Then Sri Aurobindo didn't reply, he laughed. So he actually increased the share amount. And Sri Aurobindo said, this is the kind of impressions people have. And that all extravagant illusions vanish or are transformed into a joyful acceptance of the marvelous truth that has been glimpsed. So extravagant illusions of success and joyful acceptance of what has been glimpsed. If this is it, then I accept it. See, this, yesterday only I was seeing Uttar Ramayana, where Lakshman enters Rama's chamber When he has said if anybody comes, he'll get Mrityudand, because Mahakal has come to tell him that time is over, but it's up to you. And then Durvasa sage appeared. But look at it, Lakshmana glimpses. If I go and disturb Lord Rama, I have to accept death. If I don't, Ayodhya will be destroyed by the curse of the Rishi. So he goes and accepts. He says that I accept the Mrityudand. You don't have to worry, debate, but I had to tell you because Durvasa is standing outside, fuming and all. But look at how the divine will operates. While Lord Rama is being informed by Mahakal, Lakshmana has already been, the situations have been created for him to go through the Saryu and go back. So why should Lakshmana go first? Why? Because he is the Seshnag. He has to prepare the sage of the Lord. He has to come later on. So when you see it from the deeper angle, it is so interesting that he has to go and prepare, okay, now Lakshmana will come. Mata Sita is already gone. So it is so interesting when you look at it like this. So this is the prayer and indication that when we hear the divine will, we feel the voice, it may be contrary to everything that we wish, and yet it may contain in it the seeds which will take us towards the future, and there is a joyful acceptance, a submission of whatever comes. So we read this prayer again, June 27th, 1913. Thy voice is so modest, impartial, sublime in its patience and its mercy, that it does not make itself heard with any authority, any potency of will. It is like a cool, soft, and pure breeze. It is like a crystalline murmur that imparts a note of harmony to a discordant concert. The discordant concert is our life, where everything is chaos. This introduces a note of harmony. Only for him who knows how to listen to that note. So one has to practice listening to it. One has to practice in a quietude and listen to that note. Tune oneself. How to breathe that breeze. It contains such a treasure of beauty and such a perfume of pure serenity and noble grandeur that all extravagant illusions vanish or are transformed into a joyful acceptance of the marvelous truth that has been glimpsed. Mother at one place says, if you surrender to the divine, all that is, somebody asked that, if I have music and this and that capacity, if I surrender to the divine, will it vanish? She says, only that will vanish which is based on false. So if all these faculties were at the service of falsehood or they were not the true expression of your being, they'll be taken away. But all true truth of things will not only be preserved but aggrandized. Whatever is the truth of our being, either a capacity or faculty, that will be enriched and taken up to the heights, connected to the diviner possibility. So this is one of the things that happens is surrender. So joyful acceptance. Many things, we live in an extravagant world of illusions and we want the divine to subscribe to that. Divine doesn't subscribe. If we really call him, he will not subscribe. The last time Ravana had tried it and it led to the destruction of Lanka. He wanted Lord Shiva to come. Shiva had granted the boon. Ever thought of the story like this? Shiva told him, okay, I'll come. But what happens on the way? Lord Ganesha, impelled by the divine Shakti, plays a trick. So you have Baidyanath Dham where Ravana keeps the Shivlingam because he has said, don't keep it. If you keep on the ground, then I'll be there. So he is impelled to give it to Lord Ganesha, go for Laghu Shanka. When he comes back, Ganeshji has kept it. Not technically, it was not Ravana's fault. He did not keep it. So what happened to the promise of Shiva? This is how Shiva kept his promise. Entire Lanka is destroyed because Shiva gives moksha. He came to Lanka, but wearing the face of Rama. Because wearing the face of Hanuman. Hanuman is who? Rudravatar. Literally he came to Lanka. But what did he do? Ravana was not ready. So the entire extravagant illusions are demolished. At the end, Ravana finds himself where he should be, at the feet of the Lord. He literally came to Lanka as Rama and Hanuman and made it his home. Actually, because, Mata Sita came to Lanka, made it her home, even if for a short while, but its stamp and touch is there. So we can look at the same thing in a very different way. Ravana's death is the story of conversion of an asura. He becomes a bhakta of the Lord. It is not the story of victory of right over evil. This is a very limited notion. It's a still dualistic notion. So the divine voice works this way. It doesn't work to just outer success or to cater to our... if we are still in that stage of evolution where we want divine to just do what we feel like, then it's idle even to say that I want to hear the divine voice. One might as well say I want to lead an ordinary life. There are people, when things don't go the way they want it to go, they start complaining and grumbling. That means one is not ready for yoga. That means one has to go through many more experiences before one is ready. But if we turn to the divine and say that I want to listen to you, it means not only to the voice but to the command that it contains. And that command has power. When the divine speaks, it may be a modest voice, but it gives us the power and strength to change course or take a certain course that we are going through. Okay, so we'll stop here. Namaste.